well-known faces. So first of all, let me say a warm welcome to everyone and to thank you for making the time of this afternoon. We have the super privilege to have with us the governor of the central bank, Mr. Radev. And maybe just a few words from me. I was asked as a board member in this field to say we were looking for a topic which will be really relevant and it will be topical, you know, if I may say so. A theme which will be relevant today, but as well as in the near future. And clearly, a very obvious one is the ERM2 that Governor Radev will talk about. And the other reason when choosing the topic was that, you know, as AmCham, usually we raise our voice when we don't like something. But we want to make the point also that we also raise awareness when certain achievements are in place. And clearly, us being in the waiting room, being in the ERM2, it is an achievement. A big credit to the central bank, but also a big credit to, you know, all the banks which are members of AmCham, and we're very proud of that. So we thought it's a good time to have a discussion. So we have the governor to demystify a few things which, you know, we see in the press, other things which are being talked, discussed, or there's a semi-talk on them. So what better opportunity than this one to have him in person to enlighten us and give us a better understanding of what's now and what's next. And before doing that, I just want to invite our president, Olivier Marquette, to do a welcome address on behalf of AmCham. We shall then proceed with Mr. Radev's presentation, and after that, we'll open it for questions. Olivier, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Bojidar, and welcome everyone to this new webinar. First, I would like to hope that everyone is safe and healthy. I know these are very difficult times. Pretty much everywhere, I'm following every day the progression of the pandemic in Bulgaria, and numbers are increasing. But I can tell you that those numbers, I mean, look actually very small compared to what I'm experiencing in Brussels, where I'm currently based, where we know Belgium is not a much larger country. It's very comparable to Bulgaria, and there are like literally 10,000 cases per day, basically. So clearly the pandemic is, the second wave is coming. And so I really hope that we'll be able to manage it, and that everyone as much as possible is safe and healthy. So in terms of AmCham, in this difficult time, I think we've made a point to actually be even more active than ever, obviously adjusting to the new environment. So we've held a number of webinar focusing on our AmCham priorities. And I think this week and next week are actually very, very consistent and leading to this expectation. So thank you very much, Mr. Radev, for being here with us today. And we're very much looking forward to hear your and to have an open discussion regarding ERM2 and on the overall environment and banking environment in Bulgaria. I would just like to highlight that next week we also have a quite busy week. So we have an event on rule of law on Thursday with the US Department of Justice, focusing on Foreign Current Practices Act. It's going to be a webinar in partnership with the US Embassy. And also on Tuesday, transatlantic relation, which is another of our top priority, and we'll have a meeting with the Bulgarian commercial attaché at the Bulgarian embassy in Washington, Ivo Konstantinov, and we're going to have the pleasure to talk to him, and I think it's on Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken, about effectively the US Bulgaria business opportunities, and more specifically opportunities for Bulgarian businesses in the US. So and so again, I think we are very happy to be very active and using webinars to engage even more than we used to do in the past. In terms of upcoming events, so I just want to highlight as well that unfortunately we have to cancel our traditional Thanksgiving dinner. It's usually a highlight of the year, an opportunity to celebrate together. Unfortunately, given the circumstances, I think everyone will understand that we'll have to postpone and just to come stronger next year. And same goes for our General Assembly, which we'll hold very early 2021, because it was simply not the right environment, especially given the fact that we have some upcoming board election, and so we want to make that in a better environment. So we reschedule that for early 2021. So that's all. Without further ado, I would like to give the word to Mr. Radev and wish you all a very successful webinar. Mr. Radev, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for the invitation. It's a privilege to speak to you today, all from a distance. I was asked to address the European Union's exchange rate mechanism, or the ERM2, recent developments and their impact on the Bulgarian economy and business. No doubt it's a topical and relevant issue, having in mind that the Bulgarian lef joined the ERM2 just a couple of months ago. Of course, during the Q&A session, I'll be happy to address additional questions related to the economy and the banking sector. So now I'll focus on the ERM2. You know that the ERM2 is a critical milestone towards joining the euro area and adopting the euro. It was introduced along with the introduction of the euro in 1999, and it's a convergence criterion for entry into the euro area. The ERM2 has two main purposes. First, to ensure that exchange rate fluctuations between the euro and the national currencies do not disturb economic stability within the single market. And second, help non-euro area countries prepare themselves for participation in the euro area. 19 of the 27th European Union members have already joined the euro area. Therefore, the current ERM2 club is pretty small. It consists of the currencies of only three countries: Bulgaria, Croatia, and Denmark. Danish kroner joined in 1999, the very beginning, and the lef and the Croatian kuna joined this year on July 10th. The remaining five European Union countries, Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic, Romania, and Sweden, have not yet applied to join the club. By design, the ERM2 is not a complicated mechanism. It is based on an agreement between the finance ministers of the euro area member states, the European Central Bank, and the finance ministers and central bank governors of the non-euro area member states participating in the mechanism. First, the ERM2 parties agree on the central rate between the euro and the respective national currency. The national currency is then allowed to fluctuate by up to 15% above or below this central rate. The currency is supported, if needed, by interventions coordinated by the European Central Bank and the National Central Bank in order to keep the exchange rate within this fluctuation band. However, this is very important clarification, especially in the case of Bulgaria. A country can decide to maintain a narrow fluctuation band, including zero. For example, Denmark observes a central rate with a narrow fluctuation band of plus minus 2.25% instead of 15%. The ERM2 is monitored and administered by the General Council of the European Central Bank, which includes the governors of the central banks of the central banks of the European Union member states, including the governor of the Bulgarian National Bank. This is in short the ERM2 regulatory framework. How does this framework apply in the case of Bulgaria? On July 10 this year, the ERM2 parties agreed to keep the fixed exchange rate under the currency board arrangement, namely 1.95583, as a central rate between the euro and the lef. Furthermore, based on unilateral commitment by the Bulgarian authorities, the ERM2 stakeholders agreed that Bulgaria will continue its currency board arrangements and would keep the central rate with zero fluctuation band during the ERM2 period. This practically puts an end to speculations that our exchange rate in ERM2 will somehow differ from the fixed rate which has been in place in Bulgaria for over 23 years. So a few words about the implications. The obvious first question is the implications for the exchange rate policy. It's an easy one. As I emphasized, the participation of the lef in the ERM2 does not require any changes to the regime of fixed exchange rate under the currency board arrangement. This was confirmed during our discussions with the ERM2 stakeholders. These discussions culminated in presentation that I made before the General Council of the European Central Bank in a background paper prepared by the ECB staff and also presented before the General Council. To keep the long story short, both my presentation and the background paper came to the same conclusion, namely that the fixed exchange rate at 1.95583 was a sustainable equilibrium rate that would be kept during the ERM2 period. And this conclusion was incorporated in the final decision. So to put it differently, we're not concerned whatsoever presently, and also in the horizon of the ERM2, with the stability of our exchange rate arrangements. There are various indicators that support such statement, but I would like to draw your attention to one of those indicators. This is the sole issue of the currency board that illustrate how much of our high quality foreign exchange reserves stand behind the monetary liabilities of BNB. Technically, the ratio is calculated from the balance sheet of our issue department, dividing the sum of total assets by the sum of banknotes and coins in circulation, liabilities to banks, and liabilities to government and budget institutions. The latter is practically the government deposit with the Bulgarian National Bank. We publish the balance sheet every week. For example, the last Friday data indicate that the coverage ratio presently is 160%. Our policy is to keep the coverage ratio well above the minimum required for the smooth operation of the currency board of 100%. So, if you are interested in the stability of our fixed exchange rate, you can take a look from time to time and at the balance sheet of our issue department. It's very informative and it's easy to read. The ERM2 implications for the broader economy are more important, and they're definitely positive. I'll support this with three recent and mutually related events. First, the establishment of a swap line between the European Central Bank and the Bulgarian National Bank. This swap line was established before, but very much in the context of the forthcoming participation of the lef in the ERM2. If you take a look at the ECB website, you'll figure out that swap lines with such favorable conditions have been extended only to the three ERM2 countries, Bulgaria, Croatia, and Denmark. This had, of course, very important signaling effect for the markets. Second, there is an issue of 5 billion debt on the international market, 5 billion euro debt on the international market. The huge interest of the investors and the price were unprecedented, not only for Bulgaria, but for the current market conditions. And our progress towards the euro area through the participation of the lef in ERM2 played an important role for this outcome. And third, the very recent upgrade of our rating by Moody's in an environment in which the opposite is more common. You know, a few days ago, for example, Moody's downgraded the UK. The rating agency was very explicit in its assessment, referring to recent progress towards euro accession, as in fact the main factor for the upgrade. To summarize, the ERM2 developments lead to better financing conditions, somewhat very important, especially during the difficult times we're in. What next? Looking forward, we need to address, of course, the question regarding the ERM2 timeframe. It's vary from country to country. Denmark is in the ERM2 for more than 20 years, but it's the only country in the EU, after the UK is already out, with an opt-out clause regarding euro adoption. For the remaining countries, Lithuania stayed longest in the ERM2, more than 10 years, the mandatory period being 2 years. Our aim is to stay in ERM2 for as short a time as possible. Realistically, this suggests 2024 as Bulgaria's year of accession to the euro area. But the more important question is not exactly the time frame, but what needs to be done to get there. First, we need to fully comply with the convergence criteria, the so-called Maastricht criteria. Their purpose, is to impose control over inflation, public debt and public deficit, exchange rate stability, and domestic interest rates. More specifically, it means that we need to maintain inflation at a rate not more than 1.5 percentage points higher than the average of the 3 best performing countries, to keep the budget deficit under 3% and the gross government debt under 60% of GDP, to keep the exchange rate stable within the ERM2 framework, and to keep nominal long-term interest rates no more than 2 percentage points higher than in the 3 member states with lowest inflation. So as of today, we broadly meet the 4 convergence criteria and have good chances to keep it that way if we maintain the sound fiscal and monetary stance, regardless of the current crisis environment. You probably know that in addition to the Maastricht criteria, the entire process includes prior ERM2 commitments and post-ERM2 commitments. We engaged to implement prior commitments in 6 policy areas: bank union, macroprudential supervision, these 2 being under the mandate of the Bulgarian National Bank, but also non-banking supervision, insolvency framework, anti-money laundering framework, and state-owned enterprises. These prior commitments were successfully completed. As a result, we're a full-fledged member of the ERM2. The post-commitments include additional measures in 4 of these 6 areas, and they're entirely under the mandate of the government. Again, this is the non-banking supervision, insolvency framework, anti-money enterprises. These policy areas are considered central to the aim of achieving a high degree of sustainable economic convergence and successful participation in the 3rd stage of the economic and monetary union. You have probably seen that the government already adopted a plan for the implementation of these post-commitments. These areas are outside the direct mandate of the Bulgarian National Bank. In fact, there are no post-commitments with regard to the banking sector, which is another recognition for the significant progress in this area. And I will join to what was said in the beginning by the chair that, it is very much depends on what we did in the banking sector. It was successful, the central bank, but also the commercial banks. They're extremely good and adequate in their reaction, especially the period since 2015. And I think the decision to join the banking union and the decision that there will be no further commitments specifically for the banking sector are quite indicative for the progress we together achieved. So now I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Radev. Now I was planning to invite someone to ask, but I'm tempted to ask a question myself, which would be, you mentioned this whole thing will be probably until 2024. Is this the optimal timeline, or could we make it shorter? Do we want to make it shorter? What would your view be?
I don't think it's realistic to be shorter. So the 2 year is the mandatory period, but there are a lot of logistical administrative issues that needs to be addressed. So 2+1, I think, is a realistic time frame. It's a bit ambitious. I said this many times. Then it's a political project. It's a political decision. We all face a very high level of uncertainty related to the pandemic, to the related political, economic developments. But the same questions were raised when we were preparing for the ERM2 and the banking union. There are many voices that the timeline is unrealistic. But yeah, if you take a look at the measures that we introduced in the banking sector, in fact, we started on July 12, 2018, and the process was finalized on July 10, 2020. So I think it's realistic, and moreover, the program of the government and our own program that is very detailed and technical, in fact, work within this time frame.
All right, thank you. So it probably is the time that is needed, not only to achieve change, but to achieve it in a sustainable manner. Now we move to the Q&A part, and we have received some questions in advance, and I'll start with them. We will try to group them around a few areas, which will be, well, very topical, would be anything around COVID and the response related to that. The banking union, which goes together with the whole ERM story, therefore, as well as comments around the banking sector. There were some questions on payment infrastructure, and I'm sure there will be, no doubt, there will be also questions on overall economic outlook that you've touched on. So from those we have received, I would invite our Vice President, Stanislava Taneva, who is also happens to be a CEO of Citibank. She has a few interesting questions related to COVID and the way, the response was, what happens, what do we expect? Clearly, it is of concern to both specialists in the banking sector as well as everyone else on this WebEx. Tanya, over to you.
Thank you, Bojo. Governor Radev, thank you so much for accepting the opportunity, and we really do appreciate it. I do have actually a couple of questions grouped by, by the separate teams. One of my question refers, as Božidar mentioned, to the payment infrastructure in relation to the our Eurozone entry, and if you can share what's the vision about the payment infrastructure of the country until entry into the Eurozone. There have been discussions around cross-border BGM payments. There have been discussions around rings and bistera and changes to that. Probably if you can touch upon it. And my second question actually is related to the COVID pandemics and the response and the measures that have been imposed and implemented by the central bank very timely. However, we would like to know a bit more about the measures, and for the wider audience, and in particular, the measures that have increased substantially the liquidity on the local market, which was quite high even before the crisis. And we would like to know what are the prospects there. Do you expect any changes? Do you think banks would become more aggressive? What are the results from the COVID measures, if you have them already, in terms of the loan moratorium, etc.? Probably it's also just good to cover very shortly the measures that have been suggested by the central bank. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want me to respond to?
Yeah, I would suggest we take these two and then we move on if it's
okay,
with you.
great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for the both. I think both groups of questions are very important. I'll start with the payment infrastructure because the things are clear. We have very detailed plan. First, RINGS and BISERA will cease functioning when you join the euro. It is clear. The RINGS payments will migrate to the target platform for euro payments, and the bank lines payments through BISERA will migrate to SEPA euro payments. Of course, the national payments traffic will be entirely transformed. Presently, we are completing together with Borica a project it should be done to the end of this year for instant level payments for up to 100,000 leva. These payments will comply with the pan-European SEPA credit transfers framework. We're well prepared for these changes. I don't believe that we have any difficulties, but in any case, it will be quite an important transformation. Also, starting in 2022, I believe in November, there will be a new consolidated target platform, unifying target 2, target 2 securities and tips. Presently, the Bulgarian National Bank, 18 banks in the country, Borica, and the central depositories are already preparing for this new consolidated platform. So it sounds very technical, but it's very much in our agenda, and we work in this area very hard. You know, there are certain activities that remain under the radar, but they're very important. You cannot see this type of discussions a lot in the publicly, but these are things that we're focusing on very much, and I don't think that there is any delay. So we're very much within the schedule that is included in our plan. As for the COVID measures, talked about these measures recently quite a lot. It was recognized that Bulgarian National Bank reacted swiftly, decisively at the very onset of the crisis. We introduced a package of measures for over 8% of GDP. We announced these measures publicly. They include things that the banks do not like very much, but yeah, among these measures, I could refer to the full capitalization of the 2019 profit, increasing liquidity, as you mentioned in your question, by reducing riskier foreign exposures of commercial bank, and cancellation of the increase of the counter-cyclical capital buffer for this and next year. We then also approved the private moratorium on bank loan repayments proposed by the banking industry. I can also add to this list the BNP swap line with the ECB, which I mentioned during my introductory remarks. This is another major safeguard for financial and monetary stability. So we analyze very carefully the impact from these measures. As I said, these measures further strengthened the capital liquidity position of the bank that was already very stable, you know, before the crisis. But this create the appropriate environment for the banks to introduce measures that will mitigate the impact of the crisis for their clients, the businesses and households. You can see this. We publish this data about the moratorium. The interest was quite big, and in fact, over than 100,000 households and firms apply and were confirmed by the banks. So, And we should not forget that the banks in Bulgaria continue to implement smoothly their intermediation function during the pandemic, which is quite remarkable, having in mind the huge economic decline. So you raised one very interesting question about the liquidity before COVID and after that. I guess the question is, will this motivate banks to lend more? Indeed, the Bulgarian banks were in a very strong condition when the COVID broke out. In addition, preparing for the banking union, even before the crisis, we introduced measures that greatly benefited the health of the sector. Lending has remained stable so far, and I want to emphasize this fact once again, despite the significant economic decline since March. So will banks step up lending? You know, it's a matter of both supply and demand. I'm sure the banks are highly motivated in the current difficult environment to seek good bankable projects to provide financing for. But I've pointed out this on many occasions before. Banks should remain very cautious in identifying and pricing accordingly the risks they take when they lend. Bank lending should not increase at any cost or at any risk, even when banks are tempted to lend more in order to offset winning profits in the crisis environment. I think I cover the questions more or less. So if you have some additional questions, I'll address this.
No, I think that's fine. It's just another one. Do you envisage any further measures or cutting some of the measures that have been imposed? We do appreciate that we see a second wave and it's happening right now, but what are the plans? And I'm done with the questions.
Thank you. We're monitoring the situation very, very closely. So if you ask about the moratorium, we don't plan at this stage to further extend the moratorium, phasing out in. Of course, we are ready to apply additional measures. So I'm not going to be very specific, but these measures relate to the capital requirements. But it's too early to talk about this issue. But we have these things in mind. And we'll be ready to deploy additional measures, no doubt about that. I think the evidence is we're probably the first central bank in Europe that activated the measures very early in the process. In fact, we did it more or less in March and very early April, and we're very efficient in this direction. Actually, in fact, we implemented measures for over 9 billion leva, which for our banking sector, for our economy, is quite significant amount. So we stay ready to act. We're in very active communication with all the relevant parties, ECB, EBA. Currently, there is discussion with the European Banking Authority on the extension of the moratorium. I think there is a common position more or less at this stage that we should not go further extending this timeline. But again, we will be ready to act, and we'll act immediately if needed.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Now, I think there will be an opportunity for anyone else to ask questions if they are COVID related a little later. Now, I would suggest we change a bit the theme, although still related, and I would invite another CEO who doesn't need much of an introduction. I could see Teodora Petkova, the CEO of Unicredit, is here with us. And I know there are some questions that come from Unicredit Bank related to the banking system preparation and others, but I let her ask them, directly. Please go ahead.
The first question was about the banking union and the impact on the banks, or was it?
Yes, exactly. Impact on the banks, and very short. The banks, we are in banking union, but we are not in euro area. So are there pros and cons on the banking system stemming from that?
Okay.
And I will write the second one in the chat so we make spread on the others with the connect. Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
I suggest we proceed with this question, Mr. Radev. Yeah.
Okay. So the banking unit, it's a big topic. In fact, it goes together with the ERM2 one. You know that in fact we joined simultaneously with ERM2 and the banking union. This is one of the specificities of our path towards the euro adoption. In fact, since October 1st this year, there is no full month. We're a full-fledged member of the bank union with all the rights and all the responsibility of the membership. I think it's important to clarify this. In fact, two of the deputy governors are representing the bank in the ECB supervisory board and the plenary session of the resolution board, respectively. And we also have our representatives of all the committees and working groups of the banking of the banking union. As I said many times, what we did the last couple of years was to prepare in order to be a full-fledged member of the bank union from day one. And the reaction of our counterparts now, I think, confirmed that we're ready to be a full-fledged member. There are implications in very, very different directions. Of course, they're obvious and most important with regard to supervision and resolution. In fact, the Bulgarian National Bank, with the decision to join the banking union, is the first public institution in Bulgaria through its supervisory and resolution function, which is a full-fledged member of the institution of the euro area. It is true that, in fact, this kind of decision to join to the banking union before joining to the euro area, this is something that is happening for the first time. Of course, Croatia follows exactly our approach, and in fact, the two countries now are members of the so-called close cooperation club of the members of the banking union. It creates some issues, but these issues are not dramatic. I see much more advantages of this approach rather than disadvantages. One of the advantages is something that I mentioned in the very beginning. It's quite indicative. There is no post-commitment for the banking sector. As someone mentioned, the banking sector also, through this supervision and resolution function, is already to a large extent part of the euro area. In any case, if we follow the traditional path, which will be not the case from now on for any country that want to join the European Union, now we should have been in the position that we were back in 2018. So starting with all these exercises that are mandatory before joining the euro area. A comprehensive assessment and everything that the banks did during this period of time. We did this well in advance, and it's quite a positive development. So the impact on the banks will be not so significant in my view. So one thing that is in fact you can see in the press is that it will be very, very costly for the banks, which is not true. The short answer is that as a direct result of of our participation in the banking union, in fact, the banks will pay less. But I can explain this. The banking union consists, as you know, of two segments, the single supervisory mechanism and the single resolution mechanism. As I said, we joined both on October 1st, and our banks will, following the banking union rules, be subject to fees for covering the costs of performing the supervision and resolution functions. The new supervisory fees are in the process of being calculated now, but I can say in advance that they will be really insignificant. At the same time, resolution fees that our banks will pay in the coming years will be in fact zero. That is because we have already accumulated vast sums in our national resolution fund over the last couple of years. When we joined the banking union, we transferred to the single resolution fund 81 million euros of the accumulated funds. This is our initial contribution, corresponding to what we would have contributed had Bulgaria been a member of the single resolution mechanism since its creation in 2016. In the remaining amount collected in Bulgaria, so far over 700 million leva, remains here, and our bank's liabilities for future contributions to the single resolution fund will be deducted through it. So the net effect is that the banks will pay less now than they have paid so far. Of course, there will be some changes with regard to the specific procedure applied during the supervisory process. But we have done a lot of things in advance. You know probably that we made a number of changes in our legal framework, but not only. If we add to what the banks did it during the AQR and the stress test, and I'm referring to both the AQR and the stress test conducted by the BNB, but also the comprehensive assessment conducted by the ECB, and include also the changes that we introduced in the regulations, and I'm talking for thousands and thousands of pages. In fact, we're very well prepared to start the process. Of course, we're making now some final adaptations, and also with regard to the working process, capacity, IT. But the most important part of the work is already behind us. So I don't believe that the banks will witness some dramatic changes how the supervisory process is conducted. The changes will be, in my view, only in the positive assessment. In fact, we had more capacity, we had more expertise. One should not forget that, in fact, we have free access to information that is otherwise is very costly or impossible to see. So these are good things. In fact, if I summarize, I expect, because we're talking at the end for the public will get more at a lower cost. And I don't think the banks will be very much burdened with what is going on. I think beneficial, and if we look even further in the mid to long term, I think disadvantages will be more and more obvious than the possible disadvantages. Frankly speaking, I cannot see any disadvantages except some technical issues that is not very problematic to address.
Thank you. There is one more question from Mrs. Petkova, but I know there is a question from Martin Pitlik, which is related to what you just talked about. So maybe I ask Martin to say what he wanted to ask, which is about the cooperation between ECB and BNB, and then we'll go back to the to the question of Theodora.
Yeah.
Martin.
Yeah, thank you, Brigida. Mr. Governor, I would have also a question related to that one, to the banking union. I think you partly answered it because you had some statements about that one. So from 1st of October, as you said, 5 banks will be directly supervised by the ECB in Bulgaria. How do you think this cooperation between the National Bank, Bulgarian National Bank, and the ECB in this respect would look like? That would be the first part of my question. I would have also a second one. Obviously, the ECB might, in the light of the ECB supervision of these 5 banks, might have some rulings or some resolutions. Do you expect, as Bulgarian National Bank, also to automatically adopt that for the Bulgarian banks which are not, which are under the direct supervision of the Bulgarian National Bank? So that would be the 2 questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. A few words about the cooperation. I don't want to be very polite, but the truth is that this cooperation is excellent, and it started not now. It started a few years back. ECB played quite a central role in this process. Probably you remember, if you return a few years back, you will see that in fact nobody wanted to discuss these issues with Bulgaria. In fact, we started a very good cooperation and discussion on these issues with the ECB. It was institutionalized, which is also very important. So this cooperation and the confidence are really at a very high level. So we continue what we used to do the last couple of years, especially after 2018. And I do believe that this link will be even more productive in the future. With regard to the 5 banks, yes, this is the decision that was based on the rules applied by the ECB. There is no surprises. We knew this in advance, and of course, the same approach would apply for the rest of the banking sector. In fact, we're talking for an integrated model. We're not talking for 2 separate models. The model is very integrated. We have our people in the teams that will be responsible for the 5 banks, but the final sanction will be made in Frankfurt rather than in Sofia. So there will be not very dramatic changes in the model. And something that I figured out, I knew, but it was confirmed during the last couple of years, is that the banking sector is very well regulated. If you apply the regulation, it's very difficult to get different results. So in fact, we didn't have any differences with the European Central Bank during the comprehensive assessment. We're very closely involved in this exercise, and we knew well in advance what will be the outcome of this comprehensive assessment. So no surprises, and I don't expect that we will witness any surprises like this in the future. But what is very important, we're focusing on this now, is, of course, the membership implies and require complete aligning of supervisory rules, standards, practices between Bulgaria and the euro area. So from the point of view of the banking industry, this makes a qualitative new stage of the European integration. Other things equal, we may expect intensifying competition, efficiency pressure, and perhaps consolidation. And this is strategic direction of the development of our banking sector, which I outlined a few years back. So these developments related to the banking union will further accelerate this process. It's a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Governor.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Maybe here again a question around with further. Maybe it's too detailed, but still it's around the cooperation with ECB. What happens, Mr. Governor, if, say, an intervention is needed? So who takes the decision? Is it BNB or is it the central bank here, or is it ECB? And then when it comes to, say, dealing with the situation in the unlikely event of such happening with a large international bank, so one of these 5, who owns the decisions? Who will drive the process? How different would that be if this relates to a, say, large local bank, whichever it is? And then how different would that be if it is one of the smaller banking institutions?
The shortest and simplest answer is ECB, but it's a bit more complicated than that. So I mentioned this in the case of the ERM2. The same approach applies for these other issues as well. So yeah, ECB intervenes in the case of ERM2, but and it's written explicitly in consultation with the national bank. Moreover, during this period of time when our currency is part of the ERM2, in fact, all the administrative facts related to any kind of decisions can be issued only by the Bulgarian National Bank. That's why we introduce changes in the legislation to ensure that these administrative acts, in fact, will reflect the respective decision of the European Central Bank. So I would say yes, this is the European Central Bank with the final word, but it will be in consultation with the Bulgarian National Bank.
All right, thank you. Maybe we go back to the question of Mrs. Teodora Petkova, which is on the chat. I'll do a quick summary of it, which basically is, we have a banking sector which we could be proud of. It's well operating. Liquidity is where it should be. Capital is at levels that many other countries would envy. Still, we're entering a crisis which we thought, or some people thought, it would be shorter. Now it seems it may have a different horizon and therefore different implications. So are you preparing for somewhat more negative scenarios, and what would this envisage? And I would invite Mrs. Petkova to correct me if I did a wrong interpretation of any of that.
Perfectly interpreted. And like a forward-looking a view of the governor, how do you see the banking system 1 year from now? How we are going to deal with the challenges?
Okay, thank you. I get this. We're always a bit more conservative than any other institution when we're talking about the macroeconomic developments in the future. We applied this approach during the stress tests back in 2016 and after that in 2018-19. So we applied, in fact, the worst possible macroeconomic scenarios when we, in fact, assess our banks. There are even some critical remarks that we force the banks to do things that will never happen or to prepare for things that will never materialize. Now we're in a situation when these worst scenarios are materializing. That's why our banking sector is ready. Of course, looking ahead, we are also very conservative. We just published 10 days ago our latest macroeconomic forecasts, and you can see that they're more conservative than the forecast of the government, the forecast of the International Monetary Fund, and also some other international organizations. Of course, we're looking for the worst possible scenario, but because of the very high uncertainty, it's very difficult to assess the parameters of this worst scenario. We're concerned with what is going on presently. So the situation with the pandemic, a number of records already were broken. So yeah, there are a lot of uncertainty of what is going on to happen, and we try to be ready. The only possible way to be ready is to be ready for the worst possible scenario, and to hope that this scenario will not materialize. This was in fact our approach back in June this year. I personally was very skeptical that the economic decline will be double-digit in Bulgaria. In fact, it was 8.5% and quarter-to-quarter 10%. We then projected that the annual decline of the economy will be 8.5%. Now our latest assessment is 5.5%. So the high uncertainty is an issue that is discussed. So the annual meetings of the IMF and World Bank, they're going on now, and these were the main topic. It's very difficult to see a projection that is not revised. Unfortunately, after this initial stage, after the second quarter, when the international organization improved some of their assessment, now we're going in the different direction. Current developments elsewhere, but also in Bulgaria, add some additional questions. So yeah, we try to be prepared for the worst possible development, and that's why we try to be preemptive. What we did back in March, asking for additional capital and liquidity, was not something that was immediately needed back in March or June or April, but it's something that the banks need to be prepared for the worst possible scenario. That's why I mentioned. I don't want to be very specific because don't want to create any false expectations. But yeah, we have some other instruments to prepare even for the worst possible scenario. There are many on the side of the management of the capital position of the bank. But again, I don't want to be very specific.
Yeah. Much appreciated. And yes, clearly there is an understanding that there is a borderline where sensitive information comes, and probably it's not necessary now to be discussed or debated. Linked to this, I mean, can you compare us or draw an illustration as to how do we look compared to everyone else in Europe, the other banking systems? Because we've been welcomed to the banking union, and therefore now benchmarking in one or another way would probably be of relevance. Also for us, for our own comfort, but as well as for the others in the banking union, how comfortable they see us as a partner.
In fact, we were welcome in the banking union because our banking sector is very solid. In fact, if we take into consideration the main indicators, capital adequacy, liquidity, coverage ratio, well, all the profitability indicators, return on equity, return on assets, our indicators are better than the EU average. So the only indicator that you cannot compare favorably to the EU average is the level of the non-performing loans. But again, there is very steady decline in non-performing loans, especially after 2015. The current level is slightly above 6%. The EU average is about 3%. And when we're talking about concerns, this is obviously one of the concerns that we have, that we do not have to reverse this situation with the non-performing loans, but it is not unlikely, I should say. So yeah, in general, we stay very well in comparison to the average indicators, or in comparison to the banking sector of a number of countries, and it was recognized. One should not underestimate the decision for Bulgaria to join the banking union. In fact, the banking union was established in 2012, and after that, there is no country that joined the ERM2. So these developments with the banking union, it's new for Bulgaria, but it's not a conditionality that is surprising or that discriminates Bulgaria. Quite the opposite. So the purpose of this exercise to join the banking union and one of the main conditionalities were related to the stability of our banking sector, and this is something that is broadly recognized. The fact that Bulgaria is part of the banking union is recognition for the stability of our banking sector. Yeah, the Bulgarian system is stable. We are cautiously satisfied with what is going on during the crisis in terms of the banking sector. The lending is continuing. The indicators remain very stable. But again, as I said until the last question, we should be prepared for negative developments, and this is what we're doing.
All right. Thank you. Maybe we change a bit the tack and the theme. There's a very interesting question from Valentin Golubov from TBI. I cannot see on the list if he's on the WebEx now, but if he is, please. Yes, I could see you now. Please go ahead. It's on a slightly different, well, on a very different topic, but I think still of quite of a relevance for our, I want to believe, innovative country. Valentin?
Thank you. I have a short question. My question is related to so-called sandboxes, practices, and regulatory sandbox. And Mr. Governor, would you comment from the regulatory sandbox perspective, which are areas, allowable areas, where the most advanced fintechs banks would play around? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very good question. I would like to recall that earlier this year, the Minister of Finance announced intention to promote setting up of a regulatory sandbox in Bulgaria. Needless to say, the Bulgarian National Bank is closely involved in these plans, in these discussions. Of course, I should recognize that we're still very early in the process, and probably will spend more time and resources after the pressure coming from the process of joining the AmCham and the banking union on this issue. But yeah, in order to be short, I will say that the very concept of sandboxes aimed to allow banks to experiment in the fintechs area. There are various initiatives, including in organizations in which we are very active. You probably know that the Bank for International Settlement, based in Basel, this is the bank of the central banks, establishing innovation hub. We participate in a number of initiatives of this innovation hub. It's a good news for us that this innovation hub is headed by a good colleague and friend, the former member of the executive board and the governing council of the ECB, Benoit Curé. So there are a lot of things that are going on in this direction. We try to be very active in this field, but I should recognize again, we're still very early in the process.
Right.
Thank you.
I am looking at the chat right now, and there is an interesting one also from Georgi Drensky. How do you expect the banking sector to develop in view of the number of banks which are currently operating? In the last years, we did see some consolidation. I would allow myself to add also a comment here based on what I see in the other Balkan countries, that in other countries actually the number of banks has shrunk, quite significantly. Do you expect more consolidation? Will this continue in Bulgaria?
Yes.
Mr. Radev.
Yes, it's a short answer. I've referred to this many times from the very start of my mandate in the central bank, and I think, yeah, competition and consolidation and things like that, these processes will accelerate in my view, especially once based on the current developments, and second, based on what we did joining the banking union. So these things will be catalysts for a process like this. The consolidation is one of them. It's not something that is specific for Bulgaria. It's something that stays in the agendas in many other places, not only in Europe. So yeah, I expect that this process will accelerate, but again, it's very premature to be specific, including with regard to the time frame.
Right. Thank you. Nadia, do we have any other questions? At least I don't see here on the chat.
One from Mr. Jock Noonan.
Yes, but yeah, I just saw Jock, do you want to step in? You said it was answered. I don't know entirely, but yeah, Jock.
Hi, Bojo. Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi.
How's the sound?
Very good.
It's good. It's good. Yeah, I can hear.
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing, important thing for me to hear today from the governor, for businesses and investors in Bulgaria, is the commitment to keep the exchange rate fixed for the period of the ERM2. I'm wondering, is there a scenario that the governor foresees where they may not be able to keep the exchange rate fixed?
Jock, you could add also the tax rate to keep it fixed at 10%.
I'm not very confident about the tax rate, although I'm one of those that support this very much. But with regard to the exchange rate, no doubt that so the alternative scenario that I'm resigning immediately, but I cannot see it objectively. I don't believe that such development is possible. That's why I refer to the coverage ratio of the currency board. Take a look at the balance sheet of the issue department. So we keep it, and it's approximately at this level, 150% plus minus of coverage ratio. We do not see any pressure from the fiscal policy, although there are certain decisions, but nothing dramatic that could change the situation. So there is no pressure coming from the public finances. There is no pressure from the point of view of the monetary regime. So frankly speaking, I don't see any scenario, even theoretically, when we will be forced to reconsider the level of the exchange rate. And don't forget, it is something that we introduced 23 years ago. I've participated in, I don't know, countless number of discussions, and many people have been concerned over the years. So yeah, it's 23 years. Our exchange rate arrangements, in fact, have never been compromised, neither in bad nor in good economic times. So you can refer to what happened during the global financial crisis. You can refer to what is happening now. In fact, we're strengthening further our position. If you look at this, I refer because it's very easy to read and see, but there are a number of other indicators. And in fact, it was in the core of our discussion with our ERM2 partners. In fact, the discussion about the exchange rate, of course, is very central, because the ERM2, by design, is something that try to achieve exchange rate stability. So it was discussed, it was broadly recognized. There is no single voice at the very end of this discussion. I'm referring to the broad range of ERM2 counterparts. So it includes, again, the European Central Bank. It includes the 19 ministers of finance of the Euro member countries. It also includes the finance ministers, central bank governors of the ERM2 countries. So this issue was discussed in length, and I know that there are many people who started the process a few years ago that have their doubts or wanted to consider different scenarios. But I think now everybody is very much clear that yeah, we will be in a position and to keep the fixed exchange rate during the ERM2, and I don't have any doubts about it. In fact, this is, I said this several times, it's a religion for the bank. The people that know the internal environment know that it's also cultural phenomenon. There is one minor thing at the beginning of this year that creates a lot of noise, because yeah, the public and the politicians were concerned that something will happen with the currency board, which was not the case. So no doubts about that, no alternative scenarios, and I don't believe that we'll face any issues when we're referring to the monetary regime. The monetary regime is rock solid.
Great to hear that. I wish we hear the same for the tax rate. And actually, there's a logical next question which came from just came in from Maria Yaneva. Maria, if you're on, maybe you ask it yourself, because it's much better to entertain a conversation than me reading it.
Yes. Do you hear me?
Yes, very good. Yes.
Hello. Can you share with us, do you have some concerns related to the political situation in Bulgaria? And could it affect negatively in long term the progress of ERM2?
Well, it's it's an interesting question. I talked about Larry Summers in the beginning, that he said, okay, I'm not burdened with official function, I can say everything. So unfortunately, I'm burdened with official function, I cannot say everything. But yeah, the political tensions in general do not help, regardless of the specific situation in Bulgaria. At the same time, and we all know this, that in fact the political cycle does not necessarily translate into economic cycle, and I expect this will be the case next year as well. Of course, the political framework is critically important, but if we are in a position, these things are linked. But if we're in a position to keep the fiscal stance, to keep the monetary stance as is, I don't expect that political developments will have this huge impact on what is going on. And the evidence is what happened recently. The debt that we issue, because all these things happen after the political tensions broke up. Also, the upgrade of the country. We should not forget that the credit agencies take into consideration the political situation. So unless we make some dramatic mistake with regard to our fiscal and monetary policy, I'm confident that nothing like that happened with the monetary policy. I'm also confident that we were not going to face some dramatic developments in the fiscal area, regardless of some recent decisions. But if you take a look at the data, we will see that from a macroeconomic point of view, there is no issues that could suggest that this fiscal stance will be lost. Yeah, political tensions do not help, but if you follow our path, if there is a consolidation, which is a difficult thing in Bulgaria, for key critical issues, I have not seen any criticism now from any public institution, from any political parties with regard to the path towards the euro area. The plan that was adopted was published. In fact, was not even commented, which is a bit surprising by the observers, by the politicians. My personal impression is that despite all the differences between the political parties and the main institutions, the path towards the euro area is something that is broadly supported. It's also critically important. We show in the past, which is a positive example, for example, what happened with the currency board or what happened with the fiscal position of the country. We keep this fiscal stance for more than 20 years now. If you take a look at the data, it's quite unique. There are very few countries, if any, that have achieved something like that. In fact, for more than 20 years, we achieve a broadly balanced budget. It's quite remarkable. Currency board. If you open the newspapers 20 years ago, we'll see what the concern that everything will collapse, will not survive, the competitiveness and so on. Yeah, and we pass through different political cycles. There will be a new one. Probably there will be further fragmentation of the political framework, which is not a good thing. But again, I do not think, looking mid to long term, that this will be very dramatic for the economic development of the country. Of course, there are some downside risks that could have immediate impact. For example, one of them is posing of big infrastructure projects, higher fiscal spending, which is inevitable. So the very idea, and because we keep a close contact with the Ministry of Finance and the people that decides on this issue, I know they're thinking. In fact, they share something that I've emphasized many times. The idea is not simply to spend more, the idea is to spend better. So we're entering in a very important cycle, and this is an issue that the political class should resolve. We're going now from protection to transformation of the economy, and it's quite challenging. So if you take a look on the recovery plan of the EU, the recovery fund, we'll see that over 30%, probably 33% of the resources, in fact, are devoted to activities related to green economy. What does it mean? Who is discussing this kind of issue? So the devil is in the detail. So if the political class is in a position regarding the specific political arrangements to manage this transition from protection, recovery to transformation of the economy, will be very successful. I know this is challenging, but this is, in my view, is the main risk. Thank you.
I mean, yes, you're right. It's challenging, but complement to the banking system and to the supervisory, institutions. Despite all these challenges we have here, it seems like you managed to weather well this all of that so far. There is one question.
It's true. If you allow me, it's true. I should say something positive for the political class, not only for the current government. But we are one of the good examples of the independence of the central bank. Absolutely. Some people do not believe it, but there are a lot of evidences. So these reviews that were organized, I'm not referring to the specific reviews of the central bank. I initiated and went through very, very serious reviews by independent external institutions. So the independence of the bank is recognized. There is no pressure from this point of view. It's very important. I think it's already part of the culture. Hopefully this thing will stay like this and it's not going to change. But for the time being, this is also a thing that needs to be emphasized.
Yeah, very good. We have 8 more minutes, and there is one question from Boyan Petkov. I will invite him to ask the question himself, if he could join. Boyan?
Oh, hi. Mr. Radev mentioned the negative publicity around the introduction of the currency board arrangement 2 decades ago. In this respect, Mr. Radev, do you plan some educational communication campaign on conversion to the euro in this process in order to counteract on negative publicity and some conspiracy theories? Thank you.
Yes, of course. This should be, however, led by the politicians. I had the chance to raise this issue with some of them, to say, okay, you cannot rely on this, that, okay, you don't have any firm views on this, and we should convince you that you should do something. So the politicians should be very much convinced. And after that, all the institutions, the professional institutions, such as BNP, should participate very actively. Of course, it's a capacity issue. I share this with some colleagues of the central banks in the euro area. Yeah, it involves a lot of resources, and we're pretty much engaged in what we're doing the last few years. But yeah, there are a number of initiatives. We try to publish. If you check, probably there is no single day without publication based on information provided by the BNB. But I know this because we have discussed this issue with my colleagues. So we can go and we'll present the things in a way that is a bit more technical. The people usually are not very much interested if you present the things that way, and we can make a very serious kind of analysis. And for example, when we started the process of entering the ERM2, in fact, we prepared a big paper, very big paper. It was presented shortly with all the advantages, disadvantages, costs, but everybody agreed that something like that could not be sold publicly. Yeah, it's a bit a tricky issue. One should not forget that I heard this somewhere, that yeah, the whole idea of the euro could be destroyed with one sentence. If a politician go and say, look, the prices will go up 3 times. So you can present any kind of education, communication, the idea could be killed. So politicians should be closely involved, and everybody according to their mandate and their expertise should present the issue. So very happy we do this from time to time. We go when we're invited to present our views. I try to be a bit more open than traditionally in the central bank. But yeah, we are ready, in fact, to do so. And I do believe that something like that will happen, especially when we're closer to the introduction of the euro. So we'll need at least 1 year, probably 18 months, a number of measures, how to prepare the public for the introduction of the euro. And this thing will happen, but it require broader support. If you take a look at the press, and have you seen something that is politicians or even the other big institutions with very explicit and very clear support of what is going on? It's very rare. It's very rare. So I can refer here to 2 of these institutions because it will be not fair. They're very supportive. This was the syndicates and the organization of the employers. So they're very explicit in their support. But yeah, it should be a common effort. And if there is a common effort, the central bank will be very active with the expertise and all these kind of technical things that needs to be presented in a way that will be that the public would understand.
Thank you. I think we reached the point where I would say we need to say a big thank you to the governor. And a big thank you to everyone for making this WebEx. At the very high point of it, we had like 71 participants, which is great. Clearly, the topic and the presenter attracted lots of interest, and we see now that there were lots of things to be proud of and to be happy with, to feel comfortable that yes, there are challenging times ahead of us, but we're in a good shape, and we wish that other institutions in the country will follow the role modeling that the central bank is doing in many aspects. So once again, thank you very much, Governor Radev. I would like to invite everyone to stay for a minute, turn on your cameras for the corrective photo we're doing, and someone will tell us when it's this happening so that we know. So please do turn on your cameras.